So, I'm going to tell you a story about Jack and the Beanstalk, and it's been a long time since I've heard this story since I was a kid, so I'm just going to tell you what I remember and it might change a little. There once was a boy named Jack, and he was a farmer, and he grew up really poor, and he went into town and he was going to um, change his cow for money, and then somebody came up to him and said, "Oh, yeah, here, I'll give you beans for this cow." And he looked at him quizzically and said, "Why beans?" And he says, "Well, these are special beans. They're magic beans." So Jack agreed for the trade and traded his cow for the magic beans. And then he went home and he told his mom, he said, "Look, Mom, I traded our cow for these beans." And the mom looked at him and said, "Why would you trade the cow for beans? You're a silly boy." And then Jack said, "Okay, well, I guess I might as well plant them." He looked at them and planted them, and then he watered them. So Jack planted the beans, and then when he went to sleep that night, and when he woke up in the morning, he opened the curtains and looked out the windows, and there in front of his house was this huge stalk, and it was something that wasn't there before. I mean, the night before there was nothing there, and he went outside and it was green, and there was vines growing all over it, and it went up past the clouds, and it went up into the sky. So he looked at this giant stalk and he was like, "Well, I'm curious what's up there." So he went back into his house and packed his bag, and then he started climbing, and he was climbing and climbing, and he finally got to where the clouds were, and it was all white and he couldn't see, and then he finally broke through the clouds and kept climbing, and at the very top he saw that there was this huge castle at the end, and he was a little scared, but he thought, "I'm going to go into that castle." So he was thinking, how am I going to get into that castle? So the doorknob was way too high. He couldn't reach it. But he thought, I am small enough to get underneath the door jab, so I'm going to go underneath the door. And once he got in, it looked very like medieval. And there was big chairs and there was windows and everything was huge, and he couldn't figure out why everything was so big. And then he saw this golden egg, and he thought, wow, this can make my family rich. So he took everything out of his backpack and put the egg in his backpack. And then he heard this loud footsteps coming, and they were just thunderous. So the giant yelled at me and looked down at me and saw the boy and said, "You stole my golden egg." And I got scared and I started running, and I went underneath the door jab and I'm running, and then I saw the beanstalk that I came up of, and I started to climb down, and the giant slammed the door open and it felt like an earthquake, and I'm thinking, oh shit, I need to go down. And I'm climbing down and I'm climbing down and I'm climbing down, and I finally touched earth again, and I go and I run and I grab an axe and I start to chop down this beanstalk. But it's huge. It's a huge beanstalk, and I'm chopping it and I'm chopping it and I'm chopping it. Finally I get all the way through it, and the beanstalk falls over and falls on top of the giant, killing him, and now I'm safe and relaxed.